Nothing is more important to the success of a startup than the first 10 engineers you hire. That's why I started First 10. Hi, I'm Boris Epstein, CEO of First 10, and with me is my colleague,
Alexis Munger. Hi. At First 10, we work with early founders to help build early engineering teams.
And this is the First 10 podcast, where we bring you valuable insights on building early engineering teams from all sides of the equation. Engineers, founders, even investors. On today's episode of the First 10 podcast, we're talking to Jono Spiro. That was certainly an action-packed hour, right?
Yeah.
Jono had tips for days, I feel like.
Lots of good stuff.
Right? I mean, I was trying to take notes. I'll definitely have to re-listen to that and read the transcripts. But what did I take away? Okay, so have a high bar, right? There's no one that will be better than the first engineer you hire. Mm-hmm. Wow, mind blown. I love his emphasis on like his minimalist emphasis, like less code, less apps, like delete, delete, delete.
Yeah.
That was awesome. And then like the mercenary attitude, right? Like everyone at a startup like has to be like all in, hardcore. If they're even like, you know, if they're hesitating on anything, they're out, right? I mean, that hardcore kind of mindset, you could really kind of start to see the difference between a team that has that and a team that doesn't.
You know, it's so funny because as hardcore as he was, and I think he had a lot of really great points, he's probably the first person I've heard talk about early stage, about how much, you know, we all talk about how much of a grind it is. And he definitely hinted at that too. He didn't say it wasn't, but he did talk a lot about how it's important to, you know, burn the midnight oil sparingly.
Yeah.
I thought that was interesting and a good point that if you have this, your first team of 10 or whatever, and that's your early stage team, you're going to be running a marathon for a couple of years, getting that company up and running in a product that's viable.
So true.
And to be thoughtful about not burning them out and to save it for when it matters, when it counts, when you have like a product launch or something that's going down where you need all hands on deck. But if you're doing that every single evening, you're going to burn your team. They're not going to have any energy left to keep it going. So being mindful about that, about not doing it when it's not necessary.
Yeah, definitely pick up on that as well. And now, Jono Spiro is the principal software engineer at Fractal Software. From his early days at companies like Adobe, Scrib, OpenGov, to founding his own startups like Sparky Corp and a stealth payment platform, Jono has developed a unique perspective on what it takes to create amazing early engineering teams. At Fractal Software, he advises CEOs and CTOs of their 145 portfolio companies on a range of topics from engineering, product development, etc. Over the past decade and a half, Jono has built up incredible expertise in building and fostering early engineering teams. And on today's episode, we're going to dig specifically into the concept of a founding engineer, how that, you know, contrasts with an early engineer, how people should be thinking about that concept. We see founding engineer all over the place these days. So welcome, Jono. Appreciate you taking the time to be with us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's a surprising, exciting pleasure.
Jono, tell us about yourself. Who are you? What do you do? What's the most interesting thing about you?
The most interesting thing is probably that I could probably sing for you over 200 sea shanties right off the bat without any notes.
Wow.
But probably not. It's not actually a very useful skill, it turns out. I am a generalist. I've been working in the industry since 2006. I try to delete more code than I add. And I have been working in, I think, over a dozen industries. It's weird. Every time I look at my resume, it's like, how did I have so many jobs? It doesn't feel like that.
Yeah, you built product for pet products, car dealership, for the government, right?
Government, SaaS. I worked on Flash. Rest in peace.
Wow.
Flash was the best. It gave us the internet we still don't have 15 years before we continue to not have it.
It was a beautiful thing.
So in all of these experiences and all the different roles I've had at all my companies, I was unintentionally cross-training for my current role at Fractal. Fractal is an unusual venture studio. We have launched to date about 145 companies,
Wow.
most of which are still active. Our approach is different. We are not like a Y Combinator or a standard VC. We're not a VC. We partner with Bienville. What we do is we did our own research. We found our own verticals that we wanted to work in. A vertical being something niche, could be mortuary software, poultry farming, wastewater management, tons of healthcare, a lot in the trash industry, security guards, and so on. Software is eating the world, as it's been said. So we find the verticals we want to work in. We do the research. We then hired CEOs and CTOs to matchmake them and build and operate these companies. We gave them seed funding, well, pre-seed funding technically, of $1 million. And we've been helping them from their first days. We have some companies that have just cleared their Series A.
Wow.
And my role is in the portfolio team. I am essentially a meta CTO. I work with the CTOs and the CEOs on a range of services, pretty much anything that's gap filling other than writing code. So DNS issues with leadership, a lot of founder therapy, really.
Very important.
Email deliverability, some sales and marketing, pretty much everything. Anything that an engineer can help with. So that's what I do today.
Great. Well, so thank you for kind of giving us the overview. I'm curious, what do you think the biggest change is that the industry has gone through since your early days?
Crypto. Honestly, I think, let me think about that for a moment. There was I think when I started, there was a lot more openings for foundational engineering. The cloud was becoming new. We were still writing desktop software. Mm-hmm. The large change has been moving to the cloud, moving to services, offering platforms, things being freemium. And I think the talent has changed as well. When I joined companies early on, it was a lot of people coming out of college. I came out of a CS program, and I'm really grateful for that. This late in my career, the amount that I still reach back to those foundations every day is incredible. I've been really grateful for it lately. But a big shift, though, has been to boot camps and other DIY education. There's nothing wrong with it, but it creates a different kind of engineer, one that may not really understand how computers work at lower levels. You know how to program them, but they're kind of magic underneath. And actually, the more I know about them, the more they are magic to me.
Yeah.
So you are finding people that have these large gaps of knowledge.
Right.
And it makes it hard to rely on them for things outside what they've been taught.
Yeah, I can see that. And I think, we've always had just that hesitancy around some of the coding boot camps, you want to give people a fair shake and obviously not, gatekeep who gets to enter the interview process. But I do have that sort of reticence around that type of engineer and kind of getting them into an interview process where, might not be the thing that we're looking for. So I get that.
You don't have the time in an early stage startup to nurture them.
Yeah.
And the thing is, a junior engineer, if you hire a junior engineer, you actually are committing to nurturing them. You're not getting cheap labor.
Yeah.
They're not able to work on their own. It is your obligation to grow them.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Jumping into it, really wanted to hone in on the concept of early engineering and specifically founding engineer. So you've been an early engineer, you've been a founding engineer. What's a founding engineer?
It depends whether you ask me or a CTO. CTOs often are looking for the unicorn. They're looking for somebody that's usually not as good as them, that can do everything, and they don't exist. And I know a lot of people in the audience will raise their hand and say, I am. And it's
they seem everywhere.
No, really. Front end or back end, you're better at one of them. Which language? They're like, okay, fine. A founding engineer is, I think, the best founding engineers. And let's define founding. The first, let's say, 2 engineers.
Yeah.
Okay.
This is your talent ceiling. You will probably never hire engineers as good as this for the rest of your company. They're going to help you hire the rest of the company. That is, if they stay with you and you don't start over. But your very first engineer, you want to find somebody that complements you as a CTO, that's ideally better than you, if possible. So you're looking for really, really strong people that are like you, that are entrepreneurial, but that have maybe never done it before, but they have aspirations to do so. I think that's a key here. A lot of CTOs believe that they are competing with large companies like Google and Facebook. They're like, oh, we can't afford the salary of that kind of person. You don't need to. You are offering a product that those companies cannot offer. You're offering an experience they can't offer. So yeah, you may be able to make $300 to $500K at Facebook. Why would I take, say, $150K at a startup? You're looking for somebody that wants to be entrepreneurial one day. They want to be a CTO one day. They don't know how to do it or where to start, and they need the experience. So you're going to offer them that experience. You're taking a pay cut for the experience. You're accepting equity that's worth probably nothing for the experience. So it's really about growing your career. Hungry people, gritty, self-directed, biased toward action, great communicators, and just they're almost ready for their next thing.
Yeah. I love that you said the part about, the compensation and kind of shying away from candidates who may be coming from like those larger companies due to the salary concerns, because I come across that a lot, and I see it differently because I hear people's motivations and I hear why they want to leave those kinds of jobs all the time. And it has nothing to do with money. It's their happiness or what they find enjoyment. And so I completely agree with all that. So one question I have for you is like, how can you spot all those attributes, things that you just listed off? How can you spot that on a resume, especially when maybe somebody doesn't come from like a very obvious early stage journey, or they haven't done it yet? Like, what are you kind of looking for if you see a resume out there, I guess?
It's a good question. Yeah, reading resumes. It's an art. It's also BS.
Yeah.
Very much.
Like it might offer signal at best. It usually doesn't. It often leads to questions, but sometimes they'll offer things, right? So if they're going to write about themselves, I think more people should use the description field in LinkedIn.
Yeah.
I think people should write a little bit about their work at each of their jobs. Please not reams, but you know what? The more that they put there organically, the more you can use.
Yeah.
Ultimately, though, I think it's screening. You need to talk to lots of people, start to form opinions, start to notice patterns, and get good at screening people. Mm-hmm. You need to have lots of 15-minute calls and just talk to them about what they're looking for. Also, that's the outbound approach, right? There's the inbound approach of posting a JD and waiting for people to come to you. Looking at who you're attracting, adjusting your JD as needed. I say start with a broad one. If you get too many people, great problem. Then narrow it down to get rid of the candidates that you don't want to attract anymore. If you're getting bad candidates, adjust the questions. So basically create the incoming signal that you need by tweaking it over time.
I like that. I like what you just said, and specifically the part about 15-minute conversations, because you're right, resumes sparse. You can only pick up on a certain amount of signal from that. If from that signal you can convert to a 15-minute intro, which is way lighter weight than double the length, which is I think considered standard, you could move through a considerable amount more talent and then move forward with that signal once you've identified someone that sounds aligned. Curious, I don't know if you mentioned this, but probably people that have early experience, might signal that they're open to future early experience. Curious to the folks that work at larger companies that are interested in early experience, what sorts of things might you look for from them to say, hey, yeah, you might be up for or ready for something early stage?
Candidates we've seen come from larger companies, both for CTO and for founding roles. They tend to be later in their career at those companies, staff level. They're bored. They're great at what they do, and they're bored of what they're working on. They really want to work on more. But those companies, they are machines, and they are a little bit of a cog, right? They may be a cog that do a lot of different things, but they're all kind of the same thing. You're looking for somebody that is ready to break out, and they really want to wear all the hats. So they kind of they're sort of sitting on the edge of their seat the whole time. You can kind of hear it in their voice. They're eager to work on a nebulous problem that nobody yet knows how to solve. They also, though, need to honestly be ready to work on a lot of crud. it's forms, input forms and submit forms and lists. Those pay the bills. That's the software people are buying. Not every startup, right? If you're building some kind of AI thing, maybe not, but probably. Also, people that have been at a company for many years, so let's say Google, I like to look at the career progression. So maybe if I talk about how I review a resume on LinkedIn, I actually scroll to the bottom. I do start with education.
Yeah, me too.
I kind of want to get a basis for where they're coming from. And it's not that I'm gatekeeping. It's that it's part of who they are. Who they are is not their current job. It's where did they start? Most of us didn't know things before we started doing things. So we start with education. I scroll up. I'm looking at their history and I want to watch their career progression. Did they go from a junior engineer into management?
Yeah.
Did they spend 10 years as a senior engineer? I did. I actually didn't advocate for my career growth early enough in my career.
Oh, interesting.
Are they a rocket ship? Did they go from junior to senior to staff to principal at a reputable company? That's awesome. But they may not be startup material. They may be used to working with large sets of resources. They may not be used to being the resource. There are cowboy engineers, those that build something cool and new and leave it half finished for other people to finish. It's discerning between the two, the builders versus those that just want to touch everything.
Yeah, that's really interesting. What do you think is the difference between a founding engineer and an early engineer? If like an early engineer is, 3 to 10,
right?
If like the distinction is founding is 1 and 2, what about 3 and 10?
Well, it kind of depends on what you did with your founding engineers. If you hired folks that are technical leaders, as a CTO, you're also a manager and product owner and engineer. You're everything, right? As the manager hat, even with your first 2 engineers, like day one, I want to know about their career growth. What are they looking to do? Mm-hmm. Can I throw them things that will help them grow? If they grow, I still benefit. I want them to, they will leave the company one day. I will leave the company one day. So I want them to do things that are good for them and get them excited in addition to the crud. Some of their aspirations might be leadership. So maybe technical leadership, maybe a little bit of people leadership, mentorship. Almost always comes up with your founding engineers. So the next set of engineers, maybe you bring somebody on that's a little bit more junior. And maybe one of your engineers that wants to grow in that direction gets to mentor them. If you can afford it, this is probably seed round or Series A. Yeah. Is a safer time to be hiring those people. Yeah. There are people that are probably also going to be less generalist and more focused on your specific needs. You realize that you have a lot of front-end forms you have to build. You really need somebody that is happy to put their head down and build out a lot of stuff, close a lot of tasks.
Yeah.
We definitely notice that as the number of engineer gets higher, right? Engineer number 7 is usually way more specific and, kind of like curated to fit the rest of the team than engineer number 1, right? Or engineer number 2. They're kind of wanting everything in engineer number 1 and 2.
Yeah, so you do tend to hire more junior people as you hire out. And I think it's important to resist that urge as long as possible because they are going to drain resources. Yeah. It's a noble drain, but if you actually said to yourself, do I have resources to give this person? The answer is usually no. And you should resist hiring them and keep looking for a better person.
And often founders themselves are the junior engineers. Hate to say it, right?
Yeah.
But, we've noticed the more junior the founders, the more junior the engineers they hire. Kind of like founders tend to hire to their level of experience.
That's right.
It's interesting, especially the first founder trend. But, speaking of that, right? So you advise 145 companies, right? That's a lot. So I assume you must work a lot of evenings and weekends.
No, actually, I try to encourage our founders to take a day off every week to work sustainable hours. If they burn themselves out, they don't have a company. If they burn their team out, they're not going to have a team to burn out during critical periods that they actually really need them to show up for 12, 14 hours a day for a week to get ready for your first customer. You need to make it sustainable so that you have capacity to show up when you actually really need to.
That's some real veteran advice right there. We're going to cut that snippet for some of our founders who are kind of trying to burn the midnight oil like perpetually.
You need to burn the midnight oil. That is a quality of the early engineers.
Yeah.
But if you find yourself doing it all the time, you're doing it wrong.
That's a good call out.
That's some wisdom.
Yeah. And maybe that's one of the answers to the question I'm going to ask. But what are some of the biggest challenges you see founders facing when building early engineering teams?
Figuring out what they want to start. So as you said, a lot of these founders, they're first-time founders. It's one of the reasons Fractal is such a compelling option. We help you close the gaps that you have in your experience and knowledge of how to start a company. They're usually the CTO that just came out of being a founding engineer at some other place that just started, right? It's a little bit of a chain.
Yeah.
So part of it is figuring out your management style, figuring out your engineering culture, not someone else's. What's your engineering culture? What do you value?
Yeah.
How do you like to work and communicate? Do you want to work remotely, hybrid, together? These are all the softer side of the engineering that you have to figure out. Tech stack. There's like 5,000 questions you have to ask and answer for yourself before you've started. And you're going to keep changing them, surely. But I'd say it's figuring out what your culture is so that you can write a JD, so you can hire the right person. It's having an honest conversation with yourself about what you're good at and what you're not good at. What do I need to hire to complement my skills? The CTO is actually engineer 0. So engineer 1 should probably be, if you're a back-end engineer, great, hire a front-end engineer. Pick a tech stack that's a single language as much as you can. Your front-end engineer may not be full stack, or they may call themselves full stack. If you have one language, people are going to be more willing to work on some code in the other part of the code base that they're not so familiar with. Free full stack. But yeah, it's just figuring out what you're actually looking for, talking to a lot of people, forming opinions as quickly and early as you can.
I love that you kind of dovetailed into culture. That was where we're going to go with this. But how difficult is it to foster engineering culture at such an early stage? Like, what even is engineering, or what even is company culture at such an early stage?
Yeah, company culture is just how we work. Obviously, culture with the capital C is a word we try to use very carefully.
Yeah.
We try to avoid culture fit, right? You're just looking for somebody that gels, really.
Right.
So do you like to really collaborate? Well, then you're looking for somebody that is going to want to sit down and pair on things. So that's part of your engineering culture. Do you really need somebody that can take a nebulous problem and do the research and all the footwork, ask and answer their own questions, know when to raise a question to you as the product owner? If you need to have multiple people work independently in parallel, different kind of person. So engineering culture is look at how you work at companies you've worked at. What did you like? What did you not like? Start to write it down. How do you like to review work? Do you like your work to be reviewed? It's just how we work.
On that note, I'm curious, this current trend of whether or not companies should return to office or, continue to work remotely in some regard. Do you think that remote work or even hybrid work can help a team build culture, or do you think it harms that culture? Like, what's your opinion or stance on that?
Controversial.
It is, right?
We're going for it.
It's controversial because the research is going against what companies are doing.
Yeah.
The research shows that remote workers are happier. Good workers get as much or more done than going to the office. If you have to commute an hour, that hour either comes out of work time or personal time. Neither is good. If it comes out of work time, well, you're wasting salary. If it comes out of personal time, they're burning themselves out. They're not going to be as happy. You're not going to retain them. I'm not arguing that remote is the answer. It's part of your culture. Some of our companies really prefer to be in person. They like to sit side to side. They like to go out to lunch together. Some of our companies are fully remote. Fractal was together in some locations like New York. We're based in New York. And hybrid semi-remote on like the West Coast. We had an office space. Now we're fully remote. Now we're like fully remote. I'm not sure if we have any offices anymore, or WeWorks perhaps. The culture adjusted over time. It's really just whether you do a good job with it or not. I'd say remote work can be done really well.
Yeah.
But it takes everybody over communicating. It takes using good tools. I think Zoom's a terrible tool. You have to set up a meeting, send a link, wait for people to show up. There are better tools like Tandem, where you're sort of ever present sitting together. You can kind of hear a little bit of what they're doing. Optionally, you'll share what app you're using. And it gives other people sort of like a real telepresence. They're kind of there with you. If you want to talk to them, you can just start talking. Or you can like join a quick room with them that's already standing.
Yeah.
If you see other people in that room, you could join it. Remote work can be done well.
That's so cool. I'm curious, what tools have you used outside of Zoom? And you're absolutely right. Like that Zoom, you need a link and then there's password restrictions. There's friction with that, but like just being able to kind of have like, the water cooler discussion that you would get in an office. Like which are the ones that you're using for that?
Well, so I like Tandem.
Okay.
Assuming it's still around. There's a handful of them. I'd say it's just don't be tool-led company.
Yeah.
Find things that are actually effective. I think a lot of people will knee-jerk to things like Atlassian's suite. Mm-hmm. I strongly dislike all of their software. It's all overhead. It's just all overhead. Anything with overhead, I think, is the problem. Zoom has a lot of overhead. It's as easy as it is. It's not. It's you have to have this formal joining process. So just look for things that are low effort, low friction, everyone's willing to use and have open all the time. Try to use as few tools as you can. GitHub has an issue tracking system. Don't use another one. Whatever you can do in another one, you can do in GitHub. Okay, maybe not as well. Maybe the UI is different, but single pane of glass wherever possible.
Yeah.
I like that.
Me too.
That speaks really well to your title there. Deleter of code.
Deleter of tools. I think, but it's true. I've seen so many places where they have just an abundance of things that actually people don't even really use. And they always end up diverting to one or two and then paying, these subscriptions for things that nobody needs, nobody wants.
And you don't want to spread all of your knowledge in the company across lots of different tools.
Yeah.
So I worked on a game called Glitch at a company called TinySpec. You know that company and product now is Slack. It was a game. Slack was a game. It's not surprising. The founders had worked on a game previously called Game Never Ending, which became Flickr. So the CMS for that game became Flickr. And there was a lot of company culture around chatting at TinySpec. I think we were doing IRC at the time. And so then it eventually became Slack. So the game parts never really worked out, although Glitch was extraordinary. This is to say, though, that the company culture at Slack is to build products that are like games, for worse, not better. Slack doesn't give you any tools to mark a thread as resolved.
Yeah.
Like, don't even expand it. Don't read this. Stay away. Oh, but we have emoji. Has anybody ever agreed on emoji? There's always 9 different thumbs up signs. Why aren't there simple tools to manage time? Slack is trying to keep you engaged. It's trying to prevent you from leaving the system. Mm-hmm. And they're actually very honest in their billing. They only charge you for active users. They end up charging you for everybody every time because they keep everybody engaged in all the meetings at all the times. And you have, it's treated like a big database. You know what? Close Slack or mark yourself as always away.
Yeah.
Only check it when you need to. Don't make it the first place you go. Just call somebody.
Yeah.
I love that. That's a good tip. And then all the managers that use Slack to figure out who's working and who's not working are going to have to figure out a different means by which to figure that out. Which active green dot to follow in your remote workforce.
Pick a place to store your company's knowledge. You know what? Again, GitHub, there's a wiki. Use the wiki. Don't spread your knowledge across Google Drive, across Slack, across Zoom, across your email. All these places, the fewer the better. You'll maintain your documents and you'll be able to discover them.
I love that. You've had so much great advice and guidance. If there was one piece of advice you'd offer to founders who are trying to build early engineering teams, what would you advise them?
Don't settle.
Don't settle. Keep that bar high.
Make the bar as high as you can. Find the strongest, hungriest, grittiest engineer that you can. Hire somebody better than yourself that has more capacity for growth. You are not an engineer anymore, not full time. You have a different role now. You are head of product. You are growing into leadership. You're learning how to be a people manager. You're finding your management style. Your career path is forked.
Yeah.
So they're not in competition with you, and you need to look at it from the perspective of business perspective. I am going to give this person money. It's a limited resource. I need the best possible person I can get. If somebody is not a hell yes, they are a no. Always round down. Anything less than a hell yes is a no. If you have to justify anything, it's probably a no.
I love that.
And it makes the screening calls a lot easier too.
That probably also works inversely, right? You have a lot of candidates that kind of hem and haw on opportunities, right? So unless they're a hell yes at this early stage, right, they're a no too, and just kind of let them off the hook.
Yep.
Yeah, it goes both ways.
Yeah.
If they're playing any games at all, I'm interviewing at, yes, forget that. You don't have time for that. There are still lots of engineers. And after all the layoffs, there's lots of good engineers.
Lots of great engineers.
Yeah.
Great engineers.
And recruiters who could help find them.
That's right.
So advice for early engineers. So advice for early engineers looking for their next startup.
Make sure that you're ready to join a startup. You're going to make less money. You will not have job security. You're going to meet some scummy people. Really. You may join a company and get laid off a day before your cliff date on your equity.
Oof, brutal.
Your 1 year vest date, right? The startup may love you and not have the funding to keep you around, and the same may happen. So one could be sort of devious and malicious. The other one could just be business. And, well, the founders are more important. So be ready for instability. Be ready for probably pretty crappy benefits. It's not quite Adobe. Maybe no benefits, right? Be ready to work unusual hours and to be asked to do things that are way outside of your experience. Well, somebody has to do it. We only have so many hands. Look at your home and family life. Are they going to be supportive? Will they be understanding? It is important to maintain your friendships and family while you're doing this race, which is why you need to step away and be in your life every week, every day. Do something for yourself every day. But you also need to be very focused when you are working so that you can create the time to do that. You don't want to be making up time and pulling it out from your life.
Yeah. Sounds definitely not trivial, right? Something that needs to be really thought through around the commitment.
There's actually just a few more things.
Yeah.
Coming back to something earlier, it's the crud that pays the bills. If you are excited by technology, that's great. That's for your own time. Join the boring technology club. Be an advocate for it. Buy over build wherever possible. You can always build it later if and when it becomes too expensive, if you are lucky enough for there to be a later. But really, you need to be ready to do mostly boring stuff in order to create something of true value.
I love that. So you just painted a pretty tough picture for both founder and early engineer. Both jobs seems hard. Which job in your mind is easier, founder or early engineer?
Oh, early engineer for sure.
Okay.
The hardest job on a ship, for instance, is the captain.
Yeah.
You have an entire crew willing to do whatever you ask. You can go anywhere. Where do you go? What do you do? Some of our founders have told me that they spend part of the week unable to sleep, wondering, what am I going to do tomorrow? What should I do this week? You can do anything, you can go anywhere, and maybe you are lucky enough to have some funding to do that. So what do you do? A founding engineer, their role is hopefully more straightforward. It should be. If you're doing your job right, they should know what they're working on. You're not always going to be there. You shouldn't. You're going to be talking with customers, working with designers, doing lots of recruiting, right? You're going to be offline a lot. Your founding engineer should always know what the most important things are to work on. And you should have trust with them where you know that they're going to be working on the right thing in the right way and that they will bug you rather than make a bad decision if they're not sure.
I love that. Sounds like the mental game is critical. And, you know, we see a lot of founders out there that probably could have benefited from a founding engineer stint before maybe venturing into Founderland.
That is critical. I don't think anybody should start their own company until they have worked at an earlier stage startup. You can hire, as we talked about, out of like people that have been lifers at Google and Facebook. Yeah. But I think that somebody that's done that and then done maybe a little bit at a startup here or there will be ready for it.
That's good advice. That's great advice. So out of curiosity, like out of all the questions that we asked you today, was there anything that you wanted us to ask that we didn't?
No, I think we covered stuff that is relevant.
Yes. Got it.
It just comes down to like figuring out what you want and then going after the best version of it, holding yourself to it, having great communication with your co-founder, and agreeing on all these things.
Yeah.
Like your co-founder needs to sign off on the JD. You may need to educate them on why you're looking for something. They may say, why don't you hire a full stack unicorn? And you're like, because they don't exist. And you need to educate them on that.
Yeah.
So it's just coming down to communication and really nailing what you want. Form opinions as early and quickly as possible. And then don't deviate from that.
Well said.
Love that.
Well said.
Oh, and you got to start, 1 to 3 months before you want this person to land.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's going to eat up a lot of time. You have to do this every day. If you're not looking through resumes every day, you're doing it wrong. After you hire somebody, keep the pipeline warm. This person may not work out. They may not show up for their first day. That happens
Yes, it does.
more frequently than it should. That's another change, I think, from like when I started working to now. More often, people are not showing up to their job. They may take it as a safety hire. They also may be found to be working multiple jobs. This has happened too. And I say working very loosely.
Yeah.
A random thing, AI. We didn't talk about AI.
AI.
It's obligatory at this point.
Look for people that use it.
Yeah.
Being open to new technology is really important. Being attracted to it and like focusing on it, it's not what you're looking for. But somebody that is open to using tools that will help them work more effectively, absolutely. If I'm doing a coding exercise and somebody's using AI,
Yeah.
great. I'm going to make it harder.
Yeah.
Like scale the exercise to the way that they're solving it. But that person to me is somebody that is going to be able to get more done more effectively because they're trying to use whatever help they can get.
I love that.
Yeah. That's an interesting point. And I've had this question come up with founders who are, they usually have like a take home portion to their interview. And they say something to me like, well, now that there's ChatGPT, are you seeing people try to game the system a little bit? And I don't know. I can't prove that. I don't think any of us can. But to your point, like, I don't know if that's how you would actually work and you would, use a tool to help you get over problems instead of getting stuck. Is that a bad thing? I don't know.
No, that's a great thing.
Yeah.
I use it constantly. It helps you go from 0 to 1 on something that you've never done before.
Yeah.
Really fast. Okay, maybe it takes you down the wrong path, but now you know what you don't know.
Yeah.
Actually, on this, don't do take-homes.
Don't do take-homes.
The best engineers will not do them.
Okay.
So somebody that does a take-home, great, they've got the time to do it. That's not your hire. Somebody that's too busy for it, honestly, is probably more of what you're looking for. Don't do take-homes. Just have a really good, deep technical conversation with this person. Do some coding.
Yeah.
Have them share their screen and do it the way that you would normally do it. If you're going to use Copilot to help you do stuff in VS Code, fine. But be ready to scale the problem. If you're going to give them a problem to do, put that in ChatGPT and see how it solves it. If it solves it too well, too easily, too quickly, make it harder.
Make it harder.
AI is a Copilot. It is a tool to help you do harder things with.
I love that.
Love that.
And really, I feel like, we covered so much, and I feel like we're also just getting started, right? We could do a whole another session on AI.
This is a whole other topic. I know.
Yeah.
You're right. We didn't even talk about co-founders. We could do a whole session on co-founders. So, Jono, we might just invite you back to dig into one of those two topics. But, being mindful of time. Jono, where can people find you? What can our listeners do that could be helpful for you?
Well, my companies are always looking for new engineers. And of course, I know to talk with both of you. So I work at Fractal Software. That's fractalsoftware.com. And it's Jono, Jono, at Fractal Software. Yeah, and I'm on GitHub, Spiro, Spiro. There's nothing really good there anymore. I don't really code much. I mostly listen to other people's challenges and talk with them through it.
Drop wisdom.
I try to just collaborate with them and either teach them something or work through the problem. Like, hey, let's just click around this UI until we figure it out.
Yeah.
I love that.
But it's about getting it done.
I love that. Well, Jono, you've been a wealth of knowledge. We thank you again for joining us today. I'm sure our listeners are going to get some great insight from this. And thank you again.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you.
And that brings us to the end of this episode. Do let us know what you thought of our episode on our Twitter or LinkedIn. Look for the links in the show notes. Both Alexis and I are not professional podcasters, as I'm sure you could tell. We just love talking about early stage startups.
And if there's a recruiting related question you'd like answered, or you could use help with anything hiring related, jump on our website. It's www.first10.com. That's 1st10.com. And we'll do our best to get that answered for you.
Thank you so much for staying with us till the end. My name is Boris, and with me is
Alexis Munger.
And we'll see you next time on the First 10 Podcast.
Bye.